Hello, I'm Tim Harris. This is Julie Harris, and this is Real Estate Coaching Radio.
That's right. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for popping by. Hit that like button, and don't forget to leave your comments and questions so we can get right back with you.
We will. Thank you for continuing to make our podcast, Real Estate Coaching Radio, the #1 listened to podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States. And let us know what you think about this video. Leave your comments below. Thank you.
3, 2, 1, and we are back, Julie. I really adore this topic because this topic is all about really drilling down on how to have meaningful conversations that lead to meaningful pre-qualification.
Yes.
Which then leads to appointments and agents then helping people make money.
That's right. Now, most agents get through this. The first struggle is just getting yourself on the phone. And for some agents, that takes them longer than others. But let's make the assumption that you now are actually making contacts. A contact is a conversation with a decision-making adult about real estate. Well, now how do you turn those scripted conversations into more meaningful, more fluid, and more fruitful conversations? So how do you turn conversations into appointments and then appointments into transactions? The first point is eliminate the use of I, me, my, or mine from your speech. Unless you're apologizing, then you use I as part of owning the situation. But stop using I, me, my, and mine for everything. One of the easiest ways that people fall into this is somebody will be telling you a story. Maybe they'll describe their real estate situation, and you instantly go into, well, that's just like the time that this is a conversation foible that a lot of people get into. You'll see yourself doing that at parties, talking to your center of influence. It's just like when well, it's not just like when you. Don't make it about you all the time. Eliminate I, me, my, or mine 90% of the time.
If that's the only point you get from today's podcast, trust
done.
me when I tell you guys that is incredibly powerful. Here's a little fun test for yourselves. Try to avoid using personal pronouns, the I, me, my, right? Just try to eliminate them from any conversation you have the rest of the day. And you will be shocked how frequently your speech patterns and your ego always root back to wanting to make you the focal point of every single conversation. And if you want to know why some people have that certain je ne sais quoi, that it factor, why is everyone so, why is Bob's the person that everyone gravitates towards? Why is it that people think that Bob has that certain aura about him? It's because, probably consciously, Bob has eliminated the use of personal pronouns and does not talk about himself, always listens to what the other person is saying, not just listening for a pause in what they're saying, so he can then flip the conversation and make it about himself. And the first step to realizing that you're guilty of that, because you probably are, maybe some of you aren't, but most of you are, because it's become normalized to have this narcissistic approach to life. Just look to see how frequently you use personal pronouns in your speech patterns, and then stop doing it. And then what do you fill that gap with? Listening, and then asking questions about what they just told you.
Yes, that's right. So point number 2, listen more than you speak. Record some of your conversations when you're doing lead follow-up, calling past clients, or prospecting expired sellers, for example. What % of the time are you speaking versus the other person? There are many apps for this. My coaching clients use Tape-A-Call. There's an app that's actually called Tape-A-Call. It's easy to use. But make it all about the other person every time. Be fascinated by their situation instead of being impatient to close for the appointment. When you're impatient, you're not really listening. You've got to listen more than you speak. And this is something you do actively have to train yourself into doing. I was just listening to a Jeb Blunt thing where they were talking about in all sales, they have a rule because they train not just, real estate people, but salespeople. It's the 80-20 rule. You should strive to have the other person speak 80% of the time and eliminate your speech down to at least 20% of the time.
Again, guys, if you want to go back to the example of why does Bob have that special, thing about him, it's because he takes the time, he listens to what the other person is saying. How does he show that he's listening? He actually will then repeat, and I'm not talking NLP here, just natural language patterns. When you're listening, you repeat back to what somebody said, and then you ask them questions about what they just said. Mm-hmm. I know for some of you, it's going to, because I've been coaching agents for 1 billion years, It's going to feel contrived, it's going to feel fake, it's going to feel forced. That's okay, do it anyway. And you'll discover quickly what happens is that people will start being more attracted to you because you made them feel important. Now, think about what I just said. When was the last time you had a conversation with anybody where you weren't just basically feeling like they were looking at sort of their conversational hourglass, waiting for you to finish talking so they could just start, steering everything back to themselves? versus somebody who actually took the time, listened to what you had to say, asked follow-up questions. It is shocking. It'll be shocking if you think about that, because then you'll realize that maybe if you're lucky, your mom or your spouse, probably your dog, are the only ones that actually listen to what you have to say. Everybody else is always trying to think about themselves, talk about themselves, make it about themselves. Become the person that's not like that, then you will become a magnet for all things that you want in life.
It's actually very powerful when you learn to do it. And you're right, when you first are working on it, it does feel awkward, but you have to power through that, because the more you do that, the easier it gets.
Well, it's actually the most powerful tool for anybody who's introverted, like you and I are. Yes, Julie and I are introverts. It's very powerful for introverts because introverts are often the ones that have the hardest time having conversations in social environments. Well, that's your cheat code right there. You don't have to have anything other than your ability to listen and ask questions on what people just told you.
Get them to talk about themselves. Get them to talk about their situation. What are their wants? What are their needs? Get them talking about real estate.
Well, it's the Ford thing, right?
Yes.
So when you're in a group of people or just meeting somebody for the first time, I know it's going to feel weird at first because you maybe haven't done this, and all your friends and family don't really practice any sort of discipline around not making it about themselves. Well, you're going to be the exception. Ford is family, occupation, recreation, dreams. Now, Julie and I did not create Ford as I just presented it to you. It's been around forever, but so many of you have never heard that before, so I'm going to say it again. When you're meeting somebody for the first time or in a group of people, the first thing you want to talk with them about is their family, because everybody wants to talk about family. Then, after that conversation starts to wane, which, by the way, it very rarely will, then you can move to talking about occupation, what they do for a living. And then if you are then still having conversations and the person just says, I have no family, I have no kids, I have no dog, I have no fish. And okay, great. You're obviously interesting. So what is it you do for a living? I am a AI accountant, right? Okay, I mean, you're not going to blaze through Ford.
No.
Very rarely do you get to recreation. Now, some people will want to skip right to recreation, and that's fine, asking about your hobbies and whatnot. But the point is you want to make it about them. Even if they're asking you out of being polite about your family, about your occupation, about your recreation, about your dreams, answer them concisely, and then pivot the conversation be about them. Always about the other person.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be exactly F-O-R-D every time you run into somebody.
No.
Because after a few conversations, you're going to know about their family. The example would be this morning talking to Nick in the gym, right? We already know him. We know his wife. We know about his kids. Their kids go to school with our kid. So what we went right to recreation. You did without even knowing. You asked him what they're looking forward to doing this summer. That's recreation, okay? And that caused conversation. You were making it all about him. He said all of these interesting and places we'd never even heard of. So then that caused more conversation, right? So it becomes organic at a certain point. Get good at it.
And we didn't even talk about ourselves.
Nope.
In addition to that, we did not feel in any way harmed by not having had to talk about ourselves. I was genuinely interested in where we was going. And, that I didn't need for him to be, there was no egotistical need for me, for him to be interested in where we were going.
No, it's not competitive.
Exactly. And some of you have gotten into these bad behavioral patterns, and you wonder why your only sort of, your world is very small. And the people, like, here's another fun thing. This is a totally different topic, but it is interesting. When you're teaching, and we haven't done this in ages too, when you're teaching the DISC stuff, and one of the questions you ask yourself, are all your closest friends or maybe even your family members exactly like you? That means you're not versatile. That means that you're only able to actually communicate, appeal to people that are just like you. Well, how big is your life and how many more people can you help? How much more money can you make if all of a sudden you figure out how to be essentially, be communicative with other people, no matter what their personality styles are? Very powerful, very, very effective, combining with the fact that you're making it all about them. You combine those two things, throw some Ford in there, and then you've got something that will be a lifelong companion to even if you're in terms of getting yourself out of awkward social situations, frankly.
That's true too.
Or making it so that you have that extra special thing that sellers will want to, obviously gravitate towards. You meet a seller, you meet them for the first time. You don't talk about yourself the least amount of time. You used our pre-listing pack. They know about you. They know about your marketing plan. They know about everything. And you're there to be of service to them versus what most agents do. They show up and it's the all about me presentation, me being the agent, right? It's all, here's me and my dog. Here's me and my words. Here's me and this, me and that. They don't really care. They want to know that you care about them.
Exactly. Okay, point number 3, ask good questions. Those are scripted questions. All that is organized questions leading you to the result, which would be ideally the appointment. But ask good questions and listen to the answers. Use pre-qualifying scripts so that you'll find what the prospect's motivation and time frame actually are. But you won't get there if you ask and then jump on their answers so that you can get back to yourself. Now, there's a great quote by the author Roy Bennett that goes like this. Quote, listen with curiosity, speak with honesty, act with integrity. The greatest problem with communication is we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. When we listen with curiosity, we don't listen with the intent to reply. We listen for what's behind the words. That is a whole other level of conversation.
That's such a killer quote. And something along those lines, when you're following our proactive lead generation system, and you're let's say you're communicating with a seller, an expired listing, you have no sort of connections, no center of influence, no past client. This is you first time with that particular seller, and you're actually asking them questions, and it's a scripted approach. It's a conversation that's designed to lead to the outcome of you knowing more about them, and you ask that whole communication process. The reason it's so effective is because you've shown sincere interest in helping them. How have you proven that you've shown sincere interest? By the questions you're asking them. What is a script? A script is nothing more than a bunch of questions that are written in a specific order that lead to a desirable outcome, which is the seller getting their home sold and you being the listing agent. You guys get it? These things all go part and parcel. And if you're struggling, or if you're finding yourself stuck on the hamster wheel of buying business and buying leads, it's probably because a lot of this stuff, frankly, that we're sharing with you, you've never heard before. It's never even occurred to you that there is something different about the people that are really successful in life. Not just real estate guys, across all, essentially the time-space continuum, no matter what the industry is, every single person that people will remember forever had these same particular qualities. Otherwise, people wouldn't have been attracted or wanted to listen to what they say. No one's going to want to listen to what you say unless you are essentially earned the right to communicate with them because you've shown that you're somebody that they want to be associated with. That's as a friend. That's as frankly, as a listing agent.
Absolutely. Well put. So point number 4, don't be so anxious to say the next thing. When you're jumping in to say the next thing, you can't listen to the current thing, which is what's important to your prospect. You can take a breath by saying things like, tell me more about your situation, or paint me a picture, or ideally, how does your real estate play out for you? Tell me more about your situation. Get them to talk more so you can take a breath and think about where you want to go next, but don't be so anxious to just jump on the next thing. When you do that, you're not really hearing what their current thing is, and that's where they are in their head. That's what they're focused on. They're telling you what's important to them.
And when you're following our conversation outlines, aka scripts, and somebody asks something or says something, a seller, don't assume that needs to be addressed urgently or immediately, or maybe even at all, what they just said, because oftentimes they didn't even necessarily think about what just spewed from their mouths. They're just saying things. And Mr. Seller, listen, I appreciate you asking me that. Let's address that, and after I've gone through what we have to talk about, based on.
Let's circle back to that.
Let's circle back to that, and then they won't. And it's not like you're just ignoring them; you're acknowledging what they just said. Mm-hmm. Mr. Seller, I appreciate you asking that question. Let's circle back to that in a bit, and then they'll be satisfied. They won't remember what they said, or you're just going to constantly playing whack-a-mole with conversations in sales environments where you're going to go from this to this to this to this, and you're never actually going to accomplish anything with that seller.
Exactly. Point number 5, use the super secret app known as your mobile phone. Pick it up, talk into it. Do this regularly. Use your phone more than you use digital communication. If you're about to text, email, tweet, or post, call instead. The more you use your phone, the better and more effective your conversations will be. Why? Because that's voice to voice, and that still has the highest value. The only thing better than that is face-to-face.
Oh, hold on, Julie. I'm a millennial, or I'm a Generation Y or a Generation Z, and we do everything digitally. Well, okay, think about what you just said, dear listener. You do everything digitally. That means everyone else does everything digitally. But if you actually know how to have actual conversations, you now know how to do something that everyone else doesn't know how to do. And you're doing something that everyone else doesn't think to do. That gives you the competitive advantage. That gives you absolute advantage in the marketplace, especially when you're remembering the first few points we gave you on today's podcast. If you want to have a absolute secret sauce, how does Bob get so many listings? I don't think there's a millennial named Bob on planet Earth, but you guys get the point.
Probably not.
It's because he is willing to have those direct communication, those direct conversations. Oh, Tim, they texted me, which means I have to text them back.
No.
Sure, text them back and let them know you're calling, and then
There
pick
you
up
go.
the phone and call.
Exactly right. Okay, point number 5. Have conversations, not just contacts. Don't contract contactitis. Contacts on their own have no value. Appointments and contracts have value, so don't be confused. This usually comes as a result of learning how to circle prospect, which is the coldest of cold calling, unless you're calling around your own recent sale or inviting somebody to an open house.
Drill down, Julie, because that's really important.
Yes. Okay. So there's something that coaches call contactitis. That's when you go to your coaching call and you say, "Hey, I did a great job last week. I made about 150 contacts." Well, who did you call? Well, I was just circle prospecting, just listed and just sold. How many appointments did you make? Nothing yet, but I made my contacts. So you end up feeling like you accomplished something because you're focusing on the contacts versus the contracts that come from actual appointments. And most of this comes from calling into the wrong category of prospects. Why is cold calling and circle prospecting, I'm not even going to say coached. Why do you hear that from trainers? It's because it is the easiest way to get you on the phone and get you doing something.
It requires no skill.
There's no conflict.
There's no skill because you're letting people know about a new listing or whatever else.
Yeah, but so what?
Well, that's the bottom line. If you want to learn how to be good at something, what you want to do is you want to actually don't fake work, do the real work. Remember, guys, do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level consistently. Well, if you have a list of people to call, on one hand you have a list of expireds, on the other hand you have a list of people the phone book, right? Well, you want to call the expireds. Tim, that's going to require skill. I might get rejected. That's going to be harder. Yep, true. And I hope this happens to you. You're going to decide to start calling expireds, and I hope your first couple calls are the worst experience of your life, your professional life.
In the history of calling.
I hope that it is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. There is not a swear word this person did not think to call you, and you are melted like an ice cube in the middle of a Puerto Rican summer, right? Let's just say that's what happens to you. Good, get it over with. Now you know everything else after that's not going to be that big of a deal. But I have a little extra secret for all of you. That ain't going to happen. Very, very rarely are people rude. Very rarely. And most times when they are, it's, the people that when you're calling, this could be centers of influence and past clients too, that are the most aggressive with you. And that, let's just say for the sake of an expired or even a for sale by owner or notice default or all the other 20 sources of different listing leads we teach you guys to proactively lead generate to, and they are a little aggressive, a little something's going on there, those are almost always the best leads. Otherwise, why would they be so emotionally engaged? In other words, the expired that you're calling on, the person's a little grouchy. Well, it turns out they're grouchy because they're under a lot of stress because the house didn't sell. They're a little grouchy because they needed the house to sell because they need to move across the country. They needed the money to move up to their next home or whatever. The ones that you call, great, let's come over. Yeah, they're easy to talk to. They're super friendly. When you get to the question, so Mr. Seller, just so I'm clear, ideally, how soon do you need to sell this property? Which is a question in the pre-qual script. And they say, well, if it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You guys get it? The ones that are like, a little bit, I would say.
Well, you get objections. Like they'll say to you, well, what are you going to do differently? You want to hear that.
Yes, you want the one, but those are the very ones that so many of you live in fear of ever coming in contact with. But those are the ones you want to hear the most because they're the ones, as soon as you follow our overall system and our scripts and send the pre-listing pack, they're not only going to be the most motivated, but they're almost always the best long-term past clients too.
Yeah, and you solved their problem, right? Nobody ever thinks their house is going to expire, right? So you are the one that is the knight in shining armor. Okay, point number 6, be accurate and honest in your conversations. If you don't know the answer to a prospect or a client's question, simply say this. Here's another script. Warning. That's a great question, Max. I'm writing it down so I can bring you the answer this evening. What's the best number to call you at around 5 p.m.?
Or if you're meeting with the seller, obviously, you can just, flip that around and just say you're going to answer the question. You don't want to guess or you don't want to wing it.
You'll find out for them.
You're going to find out the exact facts, then you'll get back with them. Again, sometimes people will ask things And the second the last breath of the question leaves their mouth, they're going to forget what they just said.
That's right. But you also don't want to find yourself BSing because they'll know that. You don't want to have something that you have to circle back and correct. And keep in mind, too, this is a realtor problem. This is not a prospect problem. This is agents thinking that somehow they're supposed to know the answer to everything, which is an expression of ego. It's better to just write it down, circle back, have some integrity.
Sometimes sellers will lay little traps, and you guys do this too, right? Socially, sometimes you do. You'll ask a question that you either know the answer to 100% or at least 50%, and you'll see if the other person's going to basically bullshit you, right?
It's true.
That sellers will do that. More sophisticated, more expensive sellers that have sold multiple times, that's their little lie detector. So be very cautious of that. And if you actually are going to be somebody that says, Mr. Seller, that's a fantastic question. Let me research that so I'm not winging it and I give you the 100% answer to your question. That in itself could win you the listing because you've now risen above what their perception is of real estate agents.
There you go. Very well put. All right, last but not least, point number 7. Always, always, always end every conversation with, whom do you know that I should be calling to help them buy or sell a home?
Add on to that in this market, or even if you want to take it to the next level, level 2 of that question, it's who are the 2 or 3 people that you're 2 or 3 people that you know that I should be speaking to today about selling their home in this market, and just shut up and see what they say.
Yes, and don't fall out of your chair when you get those referrals, too.
Exactly. Now, this is, again, we've done a lot of coaching, a lot of podcasts around that particular topic. If you really want to drill down, which I know a lot of you do, and taking your game to the next level, if you're wondering why some agents seem to seamlessly, effortlessly, month after month have these amazing months where they're making so much money, it's because a lot of this stuff they've learned and they've internalized. If you want to have an unfair advantage in the marketplace, here's an idea. Do what the most successful agents in the world are doing, which is, they've taken the time to become professionals. A lot of you have been successful, quote unquote, for a long period of time, and now you find yourself struggling. You're starting to doubt yourself because maybe, the set of rules that you were living by in this past market, which was making you achieve a certain level of income, those rules don't apply anymore. It's up to you to take action on updating your iOS. In order for you to be successful in the new market, which you can be, you're going to have to be the one that leads the way. Don't wait for the market to change back. You guys can join Premier Coaching right now. Just go to premiercoaching.com. The information on how to do that's obviously in the description of today's podcast and on the YouTube, everywhere. Just everywhere. Spotify, it does not matter where you're listening. Just scroll down, all the links are there, or just go to premiercoaching.com. And yes, some of you did message me on Instagram. Julie is interested in taking on 3 to 5 additional private clients. If you're really ready to go to the top of the mountain and you want to hire, which many people have said Julie is the #1 real estate coach in the nation, yes, she's interested in working with 3 to 5 of you, but you have to text me directly. And yes, I will be pre-qualifying you, just so you know. And the way to text me is 512-758-0206. But this is just for those of you who are truly serious about your real estate careers and you're ready to be held accountable at the highest level. Text me directly at 512-758-0206. For a vast majority of you, Premier Coaching is definitely the next natural step. Just go to premiercoaching.com. In the meantime, thank you for keeping this #1 listened to daily podcast for real estate professionals in at least the United States. You guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
That's right, and don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video, and remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.